Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. This is going to be a very quick little rant to get some thoughts out there about a lot of the swirling garbage that I've been seeing going around Twitter and Facebook the last few days. Essentially, my frustration is divided amongst two different parts. I'll begin with the Me Too thing. For those who might not be aware, there was a Twitter hashtag campaign where people were meant to share their experiences of sexual assault or rape by saying Me Too. And by people, I'm sure you can guess which people I'm mainly talking about. Let me start this off with a preface. If you were sexually abused as a child and you were too scared to tell anyone about it, I sympathize. I know that children don't always know what to do in those situations. When I faced physical, not sexual, abuse at the hands of my stepmother, I didn't know what to do either. But I knew that I sure as shit didn't want to tell anyone, or that would just make it worse. All I can say at this point is to tell people now. Talk to a family member about what happened. Get counseling. Unfortunately, it can be very difficult to get a happy resolution in these situations because the proof is often long gone. I know all about that, but the best you can do in that situation is to help yourself and to try and move on from it. I would also like to preface this by saying that I know for a fact that there are many women and men out there who have faced sexual assault and rape, and I deeply sympathize with all victims of this. In challenging this hashtag campaign, I'm not intending to minimize the terrible experiences these people were going through. In fact, that's one of the issues I actually take with this campaign, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, I've compiled a list of potential problems, and I'll go over them here. Number 1. Let's start simple. I believe this began specifically as a means of addressing victims of sexual violence, sexual assault, rape, that kind of thing. However, more often than not, when I'm seeing the details be shared around on Facebook, I'm seeing people make references not only to assault but to harassment. Can we envision the difference between standing in a wading pool and being dropped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? Because that's about the difference that I'm seeing between someone being raped and someone misinterpreting a compliment from their boss as sexual harassment. And it is, in some cases, as simple as a misinterpretation of what someone else said as sexual harassment. Anyway, I don't think that it's fair at all to conflate these two very different experiences under the same hashtag. All it does is cheapen the use of it and make people assume that when someone posts Me Too, they're more than likely talking about being catcalled while walking down the street instead of actually experiencing sexual violence. And if people think that, then they're just going to ignore it and move on because we're never going to get people to stop shouting out of their cars to get a rise out of people anyway, so why bother? You're cheapening your own cause by doing this. Stop. Number 2. On that same note, and again, it's horrible that I should have to say this, but unfortunately some folks have made it necessary. How many people saying Me Too are victims of actual sexual violence rather than simply agreeing to have sex when they didn't really feel like it to get their partner off their backs? Did I mention how much I hate that this needs to be said? I think that many women have laid back and thought of England at least once in their relationship because they wanted to make their husband happy, or because they felt bad that they hadn't felt up to it for a little while and didn't want to deprive their partner, or just because they wanted their partner to drop the issue. Now, I'm not saying that if you're just in a casual relationship, you need to feel pressured into doing something you don't want to. I'm also not saying the same thing for a marriage. But when you marry someone, you do take on some marital responsibilities to your partner if you expect them to stay faithful to you. It's horrible to condemn a partner to a life of no intimacy, but it's also unrealistic to expect that you will always want it, so some people will do it despite this. This is not sexual assault, and we need to stop acting like it is. Now, if your partner forces themselves on you, that's obviously a very different story. But someone begging their wife for a little intimacy because they haven't had any in a few months and then her reluctantly acquiescing to it is not assault. It's a shame, to be sure, and I feel like when this happens, the two partners need to sit down and be honest with each other about their needs and whether this situation is working out for them, but it's not assault. Number 3. Why are we supporting impotent hashtag campaigns rather than stressing to people the importance of reporting sexual assaults as soon as possible when they happen so that proper evidence can be collected? How many of the people posting "Me Too" reported their incidents to the police? How many of them didn't bother to report it because of the false narrative that the police will minimize their situation or re-victimize women who report such crimes? After all, every woman I've talked to who has gone through this and reported it was treated with the utmost respect and care in doing so. Reporting while the evidence is still new is one of the most important ways of ensuring that justice is served and that the person responsible is caught for it. If something like this happened to someone that I cared about, I would hold their hand while we waited in the station if necessary, but that would be the first place we would go. Because if we wait, then eventually the evidence will disappear, and it'll become one person's word against another. Despite all the listen and believe stuff going around, we cannot convict people based on one word or another, because it's just too much of a slippery slope to undermining the justice system. Because some people have a hard time envisioning why listen and believe is in itself a bad thing, imagine that the police arrive at your doorstep and say that they need to take your husband or your father or your son into custody because they're being accused of sexual assault. What's the problem? Listen and believe, right? Demanding evidence or proof that the men in your life that you care about did this to somebody else would be undermining that woman's experiences, right? You wouldn't trust your son or husband when they say repeatedly that they didn't do this terrible thing, because then that would mean you're not listening and believing that woman's experiences, and that's the worst thing that we can do in this situation, right? No. If it's not something that you wouldn't want being done to people in your life that you care about, then it's not acceptable to do to anyone else either. And if this scenario didn't affect you, if you would still believe the word of a random woman over your son or husband telling you frantically that they didn't do it, I honestly don't even know what to say. Maybe envision someone accusing you instead. Which woman should we listen to and believe then? It's just not a tenable way to run the justice system. In a related note, people are sharing around stupid cartoons like this one. Let me assure you, someone who legitimately makes a report about someone groping them or attacking them in any way right after it happens is not going to be dismissed in this way, especially not if there's evidence. Look at the Weinstein debacle. There was strong evidence for what this person did, and people have destroyed him over it. Look at how people are treated at the mere accusation of rape, even if it's not true. The implication that people will ignore you if you report someone with tangible evidence is destructive and dangerous, both to the victim and to society at large. It undermines faith in the justice system, and it allows criminals to walk free. We must not perpetuate this myth that people will rush to the defense of the sexual assaulter because it just doesn't match what happens in reality. If you report someone and can provide proof of what they have done, I assure you that they will face swift punishment for it, and sometimes even without proof. But I can't guarantee that, and we shouldn't be trying to guarantee that, because I've already made the argument about why that's a terrible thing to aim for. There's one more line in here that I want to mention that bothers me. If you don't name names, you're responsible if he does it again. That's not what people say. Nobody is going to put blame on a rape victim for her rapist attacking another person. That's terrible. What people usually say is that he should be reported so that he can face justice and so that he can't do it to another person. I saw someone give an example that a woman might be afraid to report her boss for fear of losing her job. We shouldn't promote this kind of mentality. We should tell this woman to go to the higher-ups, to go to HR, to go to the police, or go to a lawyer if she has to, but not to just let it keep happening. For one thing, it allows a criminal to keep doing what he's doing unabated, but even if she did get fired, he would likely continue to do it to the next woman he hired, and that's awful. People like this should be made to face the consequences for their actions one way or another. And if there's something for which there's no proof, like inappropriate comments, she should talk to her coworkers, if applicable, to see if they have similar experiences they can corroborate, or even get a recording. But doing nothing at all is just ensuring that the person gets to keep doing what they're doing, and that's a real injustice. Anyway, this kind of turned into a long point, but the last one leads into the second segment of this video. Number 4. This whole Me Too campaign is pretty much going to turn into yet another Yes All Men campaign. There are 2 reasons I know this to be the case. A, because whenever I've seen a man mention Me Too, several responses to him are all about how we're talking about women now. And B, I've seen plenty of people coming up with lists on how men can be better. And that's the second part of this whole thing that annoys me. This whole thing is just another way that people can talk down to men and try to tell men how to behave in order to be better in their eyes. It's not enough to simply say that the vast majority of men wouldn't think to do anything to hurt anyone else, or that most men respect and value the women in their lives. No, because even though it's clearly criminals and sex offenders that really need to be better, men can also take valuable steps to be better. Steps like don't talk over women, don't make jokes that women don't like, don't punish women for witnessing your vulnerability, whatever that means. Oh, and the trust and believe women thing is here too. You don't need any of that pesky evidence to convict anyone. A woman's word should be all you need. I don't need to go over that a third time. The point I want to make here is that I don't understand how a campaign about how many women have experienced sexual assault has suddenly turned into yet another, clearly it's all men who are the problem and they need to be taught how to behave thing. Never mind the fact that several things on this list can also be told to women. I don't know about you guys, but I've been interrupted by women at least as much as I've been interrupted by men, but the point is that it happens on both sides. But it's not relevant to the original discussion at hand because, yet again, it's not all men who are hurting women. Again, men are not feminists' collective punching bag. If we don't focus our efforts on things that matter, such as insisting on early and rapid reporting for sexual assaults, targeted education for high poverty, high crime areas, etc., we're just going to waste a bunch of time making the sexes feel more divided by telling women that the men in their lives are horrible and need to do everything in their power to appease them or else, and making men feel like there's nothing that they can do to please anyone. There's also that pesky little part about how if we put a bunch of lists talking about how women can do better or treating women like a hive mind because of the actions of a few lady criminals, we would never hear the end of it. Furthermore, just going around telling everyone equally to do better feels like a bit of a waste of time because I don't know many people who are striving to be worse. Lastly, I don't know how it's supposed to be personally empowering to place all the responsibility for my safety on an entire other group of people, but I personally don't buy it, and I won't have any part of it. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter. I've been working on several scripts for videos when I get time between the mountains of schoolwork, but this is the first time I've actually had a chance to get one out. Hopefully the others will be following soon. I miss doing this. Feels good to get all this built-up rage out again. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all again in the next one.